Let's get started. So social media basics. So like I just said, I'm going to touch on not so much the ins and outs of each platform, but overall, what are the basics for managing social media accounts and an overall strategy for a brand or yourself as a freelancer, or just establishing a brand for yourself on your social media. So just overall, why is it important to gain social media skills? So my main takeaway of this is just that it's expected. In 2020, it's expected that you know the basic social media channels that people are on. This is a trend that isn't going anywhere. There's just going to be more social media platforms that are added. People are going to move from certain platforms to other ones. For example, the younger generations have kind of migrated from Facebook, and they're more predominantly on Instagram and TikTok now. So these are things that really we're just expected to know. And even if you're not looking to have a career in social media management, at some point, probably a job will touch social media. So whether that's working with a marketing department at the company you work for, most likely their strategy has something to do with social media, or building your own brand on LinkedIn and networking on LinkedIn yourself. Most likely social media is going to touch some aspect of your career. I did just quickly want to touch on, because a few of the questions that were submitted ahead of time were about actual careers in social media. So there are a few different avenues that a social media management career takes. That can be at an agency, so a marketing or advertising agency, where you're actually sitting down with different brands and putting a plan together for them that they'll then execute on their social channels. Or a campaign, maybe just specific around one thing or a product launch. You might be in-house at a brand or a company or a nonprofit. And that's where you're going to wear a lot of hats, where you're probably creating the content as well as sharing it and putting the strategy together. This is where analytics plays a huge role, because you're most likely reporting what you're doing up to someone who you report to. And that's where, and we'll touch on this, you really need to know what you need to be pulling based on what they're asking of you, so you can show them that you're doing a good job at what you're doing, essentially, and be able to defend some of the decisions or changes that you want to make. Social media management freelancing has become really popular. So making a full career out of working for a few different brands or companies. This can take a lot. Usually small businesses need a lot of help with this, small like local boutiques and things like that. So that can be a really fun either career or a side gig that you do. And then you can also work for a vendor, and I'm going to touch on a few of those, like Hootsuite being one for providing a service of organizing all of your social media scheduling. Sprout Social is a huge one in Chicago, which is they're both a scheduling tool as well as they help you with strategy and analytics. So you could also work on the vendor side of social media. And that's just specifically having an actual career based around this. So my number one, the first stop before you do anything, is choosing the right platform or platforms for what you're trying to do. So what this means and what you should take away from this is, just because all of these platforms are available doesn't mean that you should or need to be on them. And more than likely, you do not need to be on all of them. There's nothing worse than just making an account on a platform because you've heard about it or people are on it and you think it sounds like a good idea, and then not having the right content to share on it. A great example of this is somebody submitted a question asking what would be the right platform for me as a writer to be able to promote my services, copywriting services. So the number one place I would say not to go would be Instagram, because Instagram is all visual. So you have to have a very visual brand and a very visual product to be able to succeed and gain a following on Instagram. So that's where, and you'll know this based on your behaviors on social media, that's where clothing boutiques shine. Artists are very cool on there, making videos of the artwork that they're creating. Travel influencers and hotels and places that are, it's picture-based and colorful, and that's Instagram. Facebook is the more traditional route. It skews a little bit older as far as target audience, but it's a great place as a baseline for a business to be because they have a review system built out. And I think everyone kind of just expects a brand to be on Facebook. It's like the quintessential social media platform. And I think as a baseline, you can't go wrong having a presence on Facebook. Twitter is a place where you can't just have an account and then forget about it. So that's a place where you need to be probably either every day or every other day, either posting, retweeting, or responding. So it's gonna take up more of your time, but it's a great place as a brand to be allowing customers to give feedback and having like a two-way communication for that type of a thing. It's just so easy back and forth to be able to do that. So that's probably, I would say, the most time consuming besides YouTube. But I'm not even really going to touch on YouTube because you have to have such a unique, you have to be already creating videos and have a process in place for video creation to need YouTube to host all of that on. LinkedIn is the most obvious one for those of you who are looking to build your personal brand, network, establish yourself in a field professional wise. But it's also a place that a lot of brands are, and I think people seek brands out on there, and it's not just to find a place to work. They're looking to see what the brands are doing on LinkedIn. So less transactional, but more brand building and understanding a company and what they stand for. Pinterest and TikTok, so those are a little bit more specialized. Pinterest kind of goes along with Instagram. It needs to be very visual. If you were doing some type of food or like cookbooks, that type of thing, that's very Pinterest. But Pinterest also has a lot of like thought leaders sharing like career advice or templates for things. So recently, I don't know if you saw in the news, but Pinterest just had its most highest trafficked day of all time because the new iOS came out, and now you can design your phone to look however you want. So everybody went to Pinterest to find design inspiration for their phones. So that's very Pinterest, and also very specific. So not going to be relevant to everybody. And TikTok is like that shiny one that everybody wants to be on, but it really does not make sense for a brand unless it's very thought out and strategic. I mean, just scroll through TikTok and realize it's a personal thing that it's an individual consumer. Us are on. We're making these fun videos about things we're doing. A brand would have to have a very unique and very strategic strategy to succeed on TikTok. And like I said at the beginning, the worst case scenario is you create an account, you start sharing things, then you run out of things to do and your account just looks dead. Because a consumer is going to look at that and they're not going to follow you, and it just kind of loses a little bit of credibility. So once you've chosen the 2 or 3, probably 3 or 4 max platforms that you think are right for your goals, you need to set these goals specifically for each platform and then create your content calendars so that you can start following those. So who's your target audience? Preliminarily, social media is going to be business to consumer because the users of social media are consumers. The exception to that is LinkedIn. That can be some B2B. And what are you wanting them to do? So what is the action that they're taking based on what you're giving them? Again, for those of you who are more interested in building your personal brand on social media, the action that you're wanting them to take is to understand you better, to trust you as a thought leader in whatever the industry is that you're trying to build your brand in. Maybe it's to hire you if you're building your brand out with the ultimate goal of applying for jobs. So what is it that you're hoping whoever it is that catches your content does with it? Your content calendar will and should change as you understand your audience, and we'll talk about that with analytics. So you'll get to know your audience better as you start sharing content and understand what it is. What are they interested in? What are they engaging with? And you can eliminate the things that they're not so interested in and then rev up the things they are. And the most important thing, if you remember anything from this whole presentation, it's choose a ratio and stick to it. So my go-to ratio is 3-to-1. So for every one ask that you're putting out there, you need to be giving your followers 3 things. And an example of this, I used to run the social media accounts for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So we had a lot of asks. We were asking for money, donations. We were asking them to attend fundraising events, volunteer for us, attend trainings, refer kids for wishes, lots of asks. And nobody wants to follow an account that's just asking them for things all the time. So you need to make sure you keep this balance, and it needs to be more heavily on things that are just relevant and exciting to them. So for every one ask I put out asking for a donation, I made sure there was 3, at least 1 picture of a wish we granted, or testimonial from a parent about a wish that they had, or fun photos from an event that we had recently with no ask, just things that they could engage with that they were interested in. So that is like my number 1 takeaway, is give them more than you're asking them to give you. So once you have set your goals, have your content calendar, you need to actually start creating the content. And this is the most time consuming part, but it's also like the creative outlet and where things get really fun. So every account should look different. So I can't tell you exactly what type of content you should be making, but there's a few key rules you should follow when creating this content. It should be visual. The only exception to this is Twitter can get away without having visuals. You can get away with just a text only tweet, but I would just add like at least some emojis in, some type of visual that's gonna catch people's attention and make it stand out from the feed that they're scrolling in. It should be tailored. And I don't mean this just tailored to your audience. I mean, it should be tailored to the platform that you're posting on. So you're not copy and pasting a Facebook post that you put out and tweeting it and then posting it to Instagram. It needs to be edited down. So Facebook would be the largest amount you could get away with, probably copy-wise, and LinkedIn. But you're going to edit that down significantly before you post it on Twitter, which is going to limit your characters, as well as Instagram. You're going to be concise. All social media back and forth, and what people are looking for is just quick. They're scrolling very fast, so you need to grab their attention in probably realistically less than a second. So be as concise as possible, and keeping things visual is going to help with that, because you're going to grab their attention with the visual and then they'll start reading. And then, like I said, make sure it's relevant to them. So you understand your audience, you've looked at the analytics to see what they like, and that's what you're serving up to them. One tool that we love in the Career Center is Canva. So down here is a few screen grabs of some of the Canva templates you can use. So highly recommend that. They have different sized templates for each of the social media platforms. So it'll help you get an idea of what size images and things should be used for each platform. And then a tool that I love is from Sprout Social, who I mentioned earlier, and it's called Landscape. So this is a free tool, and you can upload an image to this landscape. It's a website. You just click which social media accounts you're looking to share this photo on, and it'll resize it for each of these platforms for you. And then you can just download it as a zip file, and it'll have all the different sizes of the image for you. So this will save you a ton of time, because if you're posting on like 5 platforms at once, the same picture, obviously you're editing down the messaging. This is going to be the most time consuming thing to do in like Photoshop or something. And this just does it for you in like 5 seconds. And I'll include links to all this in my follow-up email, so you can link directly to these sites. Next is just to keep in mind to keep things social. So social media caught on for a reason, because people went to make connections there. and they found connections there, and now they've kept going back. So keep things, be active, be up to date. If somebody goes to one of your accounts and you haven't posted anything in 2 months, they're not going to come back. They're not going to follow you. So you need to keep things fresh and up to date. Follow and engage with other brands that are relevant to you, as well as influencers who have an interest in whatever it is you're doing. This is super important for those of you who are asking about building your own personal brand on your social channels, because these are the thought leaders and the important people in whatever industry that is who you want to be having these conversations with. And they're also building their brand. So they're looking for people who are also interested in these same things to communicate with. Again, offering two-way communications. This isn't only with other people, but allowing like the consumer to come onto your Twitter account, for example, and give you feedback on an experience they had at your store or something like that. So that's why being active on these are important, because you don't want to ignore or miss, more importantly, a bad review, and have a chance to openly address it and give feedback and a remedy for the situation publicly. And then lastly, take advantage of all of the little add-ons that are available on these platforms. So tags, meaning location tags. You can tag other accounts in your photos. This is really helpful on Twitter because you can tag up to like 15 or 20 other accounts in the image. So it's not taking away from your characters in your tweet, but it's notifying these people. I do that a lot with the social media for the Career Center, tagging other departments around DePaul, and they usually retweet the content because it's usually relevant to all of our students about events and things that we have coming up. Okay, so I've like hinted at this a couple times, but I love analytics and reporting. And as far as social media goes, all of the platforms have their own analytics in them. And I would recommend just taking advantage of those. They're free. I mean, there's platforms you can buy like Sprout Social, which kind of puts everything cumulatively together. But I think the individual platforms work just fine. And like I said, they're free. So the goals you set back in the beginning, so that was like slide 3 when we talked about what it is that you want someone to do when they see your content, is going to drive what analytics you're looking at and what you're pulling. So for example, if one of your goals was growing engagement and brand awareness, so this would be relevant if you're building your personal brand, or if you're just starting a new company and you're like, I'm not trying to sell anything right now. People just need to know who we are and what we stand for, what we do. Then you're going to be looking at metrics that are showing that you're growing engagement and you're growing awareness. So things like an increase in followers, an increase in likes, comments, and shares on certain posts. And that's going to give you an idea of what it is that people are interested in seeing. So you can scale back that content that is less engaging for them and make sure you're giving them more of that content that they really like to see. If you're, let's say, running the social media accounts for like a small boutique, maybe you're trying to increase product sales with your social media accounts. So that was one of your goals that you wrote out. This is where you're going to want to measure actual traffic that you're driving to wherever it is that you're selling these products. And that's how you can figure out if you're actually increasing product sales. So the easiest way to do this from the platform, so from the analytics that Facebook provides or Twitter, is click-throughs. So actually looking at who clicked through to the link to make a purchase. Even more specific, if you're using Google Analytics, and this is a little bit more advanced, but I just wanted to throw it in there, you can actually create a Google Analytics campaign and just use that URL in your social media. So that way, all the traffic that's generated from any social media platforms to your website, you're getting credit for. If you end up in-house at a client and you're running their social accounts, I would recommend trying to use Google Analytics to give yourself, just to give yourself credit for all the traffic that you're driving to wherever it is. So even if you're not in charge of the Google Analytics, find whoever is and figure out how to integrate that with social media so you're getting credit for the traffic that you're driving. And then keep in mind if there are seasons or waves in whatever it is that you're tracking. One good example of this is for the Career Center, we have quarters every year. So different events and different career fairs happen each quarter. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily make sense to compare October traffic to November traffic because there's very different things happening in October and November. And even more so August and September, where August we have no students in classes, I can't say on campus. And then September, everybody's starting classes again and kind of coming back to DePaul. So that doesn't really make sense because obviously the traffic's going to be very different. So you're going to want to compare year over year then, and you're going to want to compare this year in September to last year in September. Same with a store. It's not fair to compare December and January right next to each other because you had the holidays. So that's going to be a spike. So it's going to look like you had a huge drop in sales from December to January, but it's just because you had the holiday season. So what you should be comparing is December of this year to December of last year. And there should be an increase in sales year over year instead of month over month. That's going to show you that what you're creating or what you put together this year versus last year was more engaging and performed better. So hopefully that makes sense. There are instances where month over month makes sense, especially if you're trying to build your own brand or if you're just trying to create a community with your accounts. Then month over month makes sense because what you care about is that things are continually increasing. You're getting more followers, you're getting more engagement, and it's not, there aren't waves necessarily in that. You're just trying to build up. And the ultimate goal of all of this is that you understand what your audience is looking for so you can keep sharing that content that they're looking for, and you can stop wasting your time creating content that they're not interested in. A really great example of this is a few years ago, it was like video was everything. If you didn't have video on social, you weren't spending the money or the time. It was like looked down on, like everything was supposedly video. But if you really looked at the analytics for the accounts that I was managing, no one was engaging with our videos. So I had to go to my director with the analytics and make the argument that all of this time and money we were spending on creating all these videos, maybe it was performing better via email, because we got some pretty good engagement when we would send video via email, but it was not what our social media followers wanted to see. They wanted to see one picture snapshot, like a great picture of things that we were doing. But I needed the analytics to prove my point and make my argument. So ultimate goal of analytics and reporting. And then I wanted to set some time aside. So we have 5 minutes. I was hoping we'd have a little more because I did get 3 questions ahead of time that I want to touch on. But feel free to unmute yourself if you have another question during this time. But I'll just go through these 3 really quickly since we have, if we go over, that's fine too. But one of the questions that was submitted was, how do I get started doing freelance social media marketing? So a few suggestions I have, take on some, if you have no experience, take on some independent projects. So just pick a brand that you really like or one that you know would be, would lend itself to a lot of visual content and ability to get creative, and just create a marketing plan or a marketing campaign, social media marketing campaign for them. Hop on Canva, find some templates that look similar to their brand, and just put a few posts together for some suggested channels. You could also offer like a local company that you think is not doing a good job on social media and you think you could offer some value to them. Offer to do a free audit of their channels for them. I know especially now with everything going on with the pandemic, a lot of small businesses are really suffering. So I think they would be really receptive to this. And if you do offer value in the audit that you do, I think then you could open up the discussion to potentially doing some type of freelancing for them. I've been involved in the COVID-19 Business Fellowship, which is a few people in the Chicagoland area put this together. It pairs students up with professionals and small businesses, most of whom are looking for social media help. Some of them were looking for website help too, but a lot of it was social media help. It is a volunteer program, but a great way to get experience and get in with a small business who hopefully after the pandemic is over will bounce back and maybe have some extra money and they'll remember you and be able to hire you. And then also just don't forget to focus on your personal accounts. Not only for freelancing, but a lot of social media marketing roles will ask you to upload your handles when you apply for the jobs. So making sure those are up to date and it doesn't look like you just frantically uploaded a bunch of stuff for a week because you were going to apply for this job and saw that they wanted your handles. It needs to be consistent over time and clear that you've put time and effort into this and this is something that you're passionate about. And then somebody else, and if this was your question and I didn't touch on everything, you can just feel free to chime in. But another question was, do most people use Hootsuite and scheduling tools like that? I personally prefer not to use a scheduling tool. It's really going to depend on the nature of what you're doing. You have to pay for Hootsuite, and the platforms like Facebook and Twitter, they have scheduling already built into them and they're free. They're also specialized for like they're built in. So as things change on Facebook is automatically changing the scheduling tool. Same with Twitter. Sometimes it's a little bit delayed for Hootsuite and like Sprout Social to catch up with that. So sometimes I've had issues where it doesn't match up with the changes to the platform. It's also an investment because you're paying for these, whereas just using the platform built-in scheduling is free. And again, like I said, you're not going to be using the same post on all platforms. So to me, having all of your social channels open in the tabs of your browser is the same as going into Hootsuite and scheduling on each of the columns. So I just prefer the free version. But I can see where if you're running a really huge brand and maybe there's multiple people collaborating on the same accounts, I could see where you would need a Hootsuite or a scheduling tool like that. And then what platforms other than LinkedIn can help me market my own freelance writing services? So this is going to go back to, again, the beginning where we talked about how to choose the right platform. What is your dream client for your freelance writing business and where are they? Social is mostly B2C. So I'm assuming your freelance writing clients are going to be a business. That's just an assumption. So I know you mentioned in your question that you were very familiar with LinkedIn, but that probably honestly is your best bet. And I love the LinkedIn article tool. The way that it formats the articles once you publish them is no other platform has something like that. So it sounds like you're familiar with LinkedIn and that might be the best bet. The only thing I wanted to mention is Facebook has the best review option. So if you're trying to launch yourself as a brand or you're going to have a company name or something like that, and you want to collect reviews from people who you've done freelance work for before, Facebook would be my recommendation to establish yourself there and start collecting reviews, just because when you go to someone's page on Facebook, one of the first things you see, and you can even pin it to the top, is their reviews. And that's the only thing lacking from other platforms is that it doesn't have that review option. And that is time.
Sarah, I'm going to launch our event checkout poll. Sorry, this is Margie. I'm going to launch our event checkout poll. We really want your feedback. We're collecting information from folks. And if you have ideas for other future topics, please throw them in the chat. But if you could do the poll before you exit, but Sarah's still available for questions, so feel free to just unmute and ask them or throw them in the chat or give us your ideas.
Yeah, so if you want to be anonymous, you can just chat me questions. Otherwise, feel free to unmute yourself. You can ask a question.
Can I ask, so I primarily use social media, Instagram, to show my artwork. And I've kind of been considering switching to, I think they call it Instagram for Business. It might have changed to something else, but basically, Instagram gives you analytics on how your followers engage with your content.
Yes.
My only hesitation is that I've heard from other people, and I don't know if this is true, that switching your account from like a personal to a business changes the way that your followers see your content or like interact with your content. Like it's a less organic interaction. And I don't know if that's true or if that's a good or bad thing. I don't know if you can kind of attest to that.
Yes. So it's basic analytics that you're getting. It's nothing crazy. It can be interesting to see, but you can probably get the same information just because you're managing your own account. Um, but yes, I mean, Facebook owns Instagram, and the biggest thing about Facebook is the algorithm and that it changes week by week. And it is based on its businesses, business pages. So I would definitely agree. They would never, I don't think they would ever openly share that Instagram saying, if you switch to a business account, you're going to be subjected to our algorithm and we're going to potentially suppress some of your content. But I would definitely see how that would be, that would change the way things are. So I guess if you have a lot of unanswered questions and it's worth it for you to have those analytics, risking potentially losing some of the like organic following that you have, then switch over. But if you have a pretty good following, I wouldn't change anything, because yes, I would agree. I think that that probably is going to happen.
If I wanted to, and thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
So I am kind of worried about losing that organic connection. Um, do you know any alternatives instead of, I guess, switching my personal to a business? Like, what else could I use to get analytics on how people interact with my stuff?
Instagram is hard because you can't even export the analytics. So that's why I wouldn't even encourage you to try to get the analytics by switching to a business account because it's so minimal what you're going to get by switching. They just really don't do a good job. I mean, you could track on your own. I mean, a lot of what I end up doing for our analytics for Instagram, because what we're really tracking is engagement. That's what we care about. I pull it by myself. So I'm literally manually going through and count and summarizing our likes that we got, any tags that we got, comments and shares for the last like week or two. And literally just putting it in an Excel sheet. And I am actually happy to share my analytics template with everybody. I can include that in my follow-up email because it's like an algorithm. You just plug everything in. It pulls it and makes it into like charts and things like that. So that's my workaround, is literally it's manual going through and seeing how content performed.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, I wouldn't.
even if you
Yeah.
have the business page, you still have to do that because it doesn't break it down like that for you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your
Yeah.
insight.
Yeah, it's a good question.
All right, if you guys think of, sorry, Sarah, I'm just going to pop in and say, if you guys think of other topics you would like to see, we have Skills Labs Weekly. We're currently trying to plan winter. We also have some career toolkit workshops. One of the ones that's coming up in November is project managing your job search. And check out the Career Center website for our new career library, which features over 50 handouts with a lot of great tips for you guys.
Thanks, Margie. I'll stay on until everybody logs off just in case anybody wants to linger and ask a question.